I set up a meeting with this guy. Shirt is wide open, hairy chest, has a huge medallion of an Indian on his chest. You could see he had several stab wounds, not fresh, just several stab wounds, rings on every finger. Not to make fun, but he had a little bit of a wandering eye, so you weren't sure if he was looking at you or not. And he says, "Are you Jaime?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm Jaime." And he just makes like this weird scream and goes into a pose, like a weird pose. And it reminded me Elvis in Vegas when he used to get down on the ground. And he kept that pose for something like 20 or 30 seconds, right? Just staring into space. And then all of a sudden he starts speaking in tongues that I didn't understand what he was saying. It turned out not to be Santeria, but Palo Mayombe, which is the dark side, or what they call the evil side of Santeria.
Apparently you did a very good job down there because you got promoted in Merida.
I did get promoted as the RAC, or resident agent in charge. And at the time, we actually did probably one of the biggest cases in Mexico, which we dismantled what was left of the Juarez cartel and the arrest of the governor of Quintana Roo, who was basically facilitating the cartel to do whatever they wanted in the state of Quintana Roo. He was eventually extradited to the Southern District of New York because we indicted the case in the Southern District.
And let me just tell you right now, that's a place you never want to be indicted in the United States because they will get you. I mean, I love it. I love it.
It's, yes, and it was a pleasure working with the prosecutors there.
Yep.
And still remain friends with them. Gordon Golumbek was one of the prosecutors, and Richard Sullivan, who's now a federal judge in the Court of Appeals. So they did very well as well. Yeah. But we indicted several of the leadership of that organization. And in Mexico, they had something like 115 indictments at the time, and most of them were government officials, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. But that's what I like. People want to challenge us. Well, you were a DEA agent. What do you think about smoking weed? I really don't give. I have my opinions, and I'm not going to go off because that would tie up another 30 minutes here. But I have my own opinions. But that was never DEA's job, was to go after the users. We were going after the big boys. And look, you're taking out government officials down there. A governor? Whoa, that's big stuff. That's
yeah,
big
that
time.
was my second governor. When I was in Miami, there was a former governor who was running for president, and he was financing his campaign with the drug proceeds. I guess I shouldn't mention who that person is, but we made several arrests in Miami, and eventually that governor was arrested, or former governor was arrested as well.
Convicted?
For a South American country.
Was he convicted?
He was convicted in that country. He was not extradited for a number of reasons, but he was convicted and he was in prison in that country.
I had a question I wanted to. So I tell you, this age thing, sometimes my mind just might take a little. Like
that's all right.
Like a dog.
That's
it's like
both
when a
of
dog.
Us.
It's like when a dog sees a squirrel. Squirrel. But tell us. I mean, you're in Mexico. Were you authorized to carry a weapon down there?
Well, there is no, right? The official answer is no.
Right.
There are certain agreements, right, between departments, and let's put it this way: I would not be down there without a weapon.
Yeah.
But the official answer is no. We're not armed. But
and did you have diplomatic immunity?
No, you had a diplomatic passport, but you did not have diplomatic immunity, which there's a big difference.
And it's to this day. I think there are certain people in DEA in Mexico City that might have diplomatic immunity, but you guys out in the field, none of you ever did, and to this day still don't.
At the time, the regional director was the only person with diplomatic immunity for DEA. Back then, when I arrived there, it was still not in regions. It was still a country attaché. Then it was converted to the North American region that included Central America and Canada. But that was the only person who really had diplomatic immunity. So we did have a passport, but not really, not officially covered.
So now you're aware of the background of what happened to Kiki Camarena back in the mid 1980s. Did that, and I know the answer, but I want our listeners to understand our mindset when we agree to do things like this. Did you not consider the danger factor to you and your family before you moved down there? I know you did, but just kind of explain that to us, your mindset on that.
It's almost, I don't know, it's a strange psychology, Steve. You almost feel like you're going to be protected. Now, I don't know if it's just a bravado of being a DEA agent, or is that somehow you feel or you believe so much in the mission of
Mm-hmm.
what you have to do and what needs to be done, that all these things about safety and family unfortunately become secondary,
Mm-hmm.
and your main thought is mission, purpose, and country.
Yep.
And I know that may sound a little foolish to someone, right? But it's a different mindset, and sometimes you feel almost indestructible. You feel like you're gonna get it done, and somehow you're going to be blessed and protected. And not only that, with what happened to Kiki, drug trafficking and other criminals took note of what happened, because the response of the United States was very strong.
Right.
And that protected you while you were in Colombia and protected me while I was in Mexico. And as you know, these criminals are just ruthless. They're ruthless and they could
Yep.
care less. But yet, the power of that flag in our country kept them in check to a certain extent.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. I want to stand up and wave the flag now. Just listening to you talk about that. It's just kind of unspeakable. I'm almost at a loss of words for the bravery, but I think you're like me. I'm a Christian also. I don't believe in luck and coincidence. I think the good Lord has a plan for all of us. And I always said that as much as I thought I was a tough guy, I've never been a tough guy, to be quite honest with you. I've faced a lot of danger just like you have, just like almost everybody in DEA has. But I always felt like when the good Lord says it's your time to go, I could be sitting here talking to you on a podcast and falling on my chair from a heart attack, or you could be on a helicopter coming into a hot landing zone and get shot on the way in. It's all in His timing, and I didn't. You're not stupid about it. You still consider your situation, and especially of your family, but you make good, common sense, sound decisions, and you trust in the Lord to protect you. Would you agree to that?
Amen. Amen.
There you
100%.
go. So,
Amen.
I'll get off my pulpit now. I don't want to preach to everybody, but it's
No,
just the
well
way I
received.
think.
Well received.
That's just the way I think. I get criticized sometimes for talking about being a Christian. You know what? Go ahead and criticize me all you want to, because I'm not going to stop.
Yes.
That's the way it is.
Yes.
So you're there now, and then 2002 you get another transfer, right?
Yeah, again, did very well in Mexico. Was planning to stay a little bit longer. You could stay up to 6.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
but we detected surveillance around our house. Bad guys conducted surveillance at that time. So that means that there was something bad that was about to happen, right?
Oh yeah.
So then the regional director was Tony Placido,
Oh, love
who I
that
just
guy.
love Tony. I just love Tony, and I
He
have
was a he was a
so
guest
much
on the show.
respect for him. Yeah, to this day, it just a leader among leaders, Tony.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
He's a former guest here on Game of Crimes, and he was once I got promoted to SES and moved back to Washington, he was my boss. Never a better
yes,
boss that I worked for.
yes, yes. Just
So
tremendous respect for him. So as soon as I reported that, he says, time to go. And they immediately moved me back to the United States. And I was lucky enough to land in Tampa, Florida as the group supervisor of Task Force One,
which was
which was a task force, just enforcement task force. And I had something like 10 different departments on there. And it was just the greatest experience ever, because there was nothing we couldn't do. I mean, I had something like 4 or 5 DEA agents, and the rest were deputized detectives, sharp guys from Hillsborough County, Polk County, Tampa PD, Clearwater PD, Pinellas County, FDLE. Actually, the former commissioner of FDLE was in my group originally as an agent, and we just had a blast. This was just so much fun, and perhaps one of my best assignments, because we really were like a family and took care of each other. And it was just a great experience. I think we led the entire Miami division. As you know, we were part of the Miami Field Division in arrest and seizures that year in 2002, 2003. So it's just a great experience, and I stay in touch with a lot of them to this day as well.
Is that when you were assigned to that special operation down there that I think is still ongoing today that has been so
Well,
successful?
yeah, funny enough, I'm there for a couple of years. At the time, the assistant special agent in charge was Dominic Albanese, a
Good
good
man.
friend as well. And they were starting the North Group of Panama Express. And he called me in office. He says, I need somebody with overseas experience and diversified experience. So I need to transfer you to start this group. Of course, the task force, they were up in arms because I was leaving. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But we started that operation. The South Group was already working. This was another strike force with the FBI and with HSI. And we started the North Group. That has been perhaps the longest standing operation and one of the most successful operations in law enforcement.
Give us an idea of a typical seizure in Operation Panama Express, because this, folks, if you're not sitting down, sit down, because this is good.
Yeah, this is all intelligence driven operation. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to actually detect vessels, to detect submersible and semi submersible vessels as well. These are, for those in your audience that don't know, these are submarines bringing tons and tons of cocaine and other drugs into this continent.
These are
U.S.
homemade submarines.
Homemade submarines that are made in the middle of the jungle, triple canopy, in some
Unbelievable.
riverine, and the material somehow gets into is transported into the jungle on donkeys and backs and horses, and the motors and all the material, the fiberglass, and they sail these things out of there and start heading this way. We work very close with the military, I forgot to mention, with the Coast Guard in particular,
Yep.
and their enforcement units. And there's many things that we do, which I can't disclose, as you know, to put the X on target. And in that huge ocean, we managed to find these vessels that are heading this way with compartments or semi-submersible. And then what we do, of course, these are just transporters and mechanics that come, and maybe a load guard, but we develop information and witnesses, and this group goes after command and control after these seizures are made, and in conjunction with the government of Colombia and with another country, Panama Express, because that's the way we brought the defendants through Panama. Our great friend Jay Bergman was there. My dear friend Jay Bergman was in Panama. If it wasn't for him, I don't think this operation would be going right now. And then we transport him for prosecution back in the United States. To this day, the ton amount of cocaine and other drugs that have been seized and the amount of defendants is just astronomical. I don't even know. He's retired now, so I don't know. Defendants, I'm sure there's over 500 or more, and just tons and tons of drugs have been seized in the high seas.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about 100 kilos. We're not talking about 500 kilos. We're talking about thousands and thousands of kilos in a single seizure. It's one of the most successful programs I'd ever heard of. Later in my career, I was the director of the OSDEF Fusion Center, which was OSDEF Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which is owned by the Department of Justice. And we would go for meetings down in Tampa to discuss different things, mostly funding, to be quite honest with you. But it was just so impressive to see these dedicated people down there from all these different agencies. Was there competition amongst agencies? Absolutely. All those type A personalities in one room, there's going to be a lot of competition, but these guys are still putting that crap aside and getting the job done. It's just, my hat's off to anybody that ever worked in Pan-X, because it was just fantastic. Love to hear the stories there.
Yeah, we work very closely with JADF South, Joint Interagency Task Force South. And again, that's military interagency as well down in the Keys, and work very closely there with the Coast Guard and all the other agencies that were part of that task force. So it's really, really a total government effort, because that's the only way that you can deter these organizations. And it takes a lot of intel, a lot of work, just a lot of work to actually put X on target and to prosecute these individuals as well.
So, Jaime, you just told us about everything going on with Pan-X, Operation Panama Express, which is fantastic. And that, to my knowledge, is still going on today, right?
Still going on, and there's seizures really all over the world, and a lot of other jurisdictions that have been
Mm-hmm.
involved, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, of course, are crucial, as well as other agencies are involved. So it's really a government community effort
Mm-hmm.
in sidelining these organizations and preventing these loads to get into the United States. And listen, every time you seize even 1 kilo, we're saving lives.
Yeah,
So you can only
absolutely.
imagine tons after tons of tons how many lives are saved as a result.
Yeah. People might say, well, this war on drugs is lost. Well, what if the people in the United States stopped demand for cocaine? Could that help? And that's a whole episode by itself.
Absolutely.
That's Murph getting on the soapbox, and I don't want to do that here because we're talking about Jaime. Now, in DEA, if you decide to take the management path, which Jaime's already made that choice here, he's a group supervisor at GS 14, you have to do what we call headquarters time. And so that's next up for you, right?
That is correct.
So
That is correct.
how did you work that? Because you didn't go to Washington D.C., did you?
No, of course. Back then, they started recruiting you, right? The system has changed somewhat, but you start receiving calls from either Special Operations Division, SOD, or for one of the divisions because they know your number is up. I kind of wanted to stay in some capacity as an investigator, as a coordinator in DC. You're helping, but you're shuffling a lot of paper around, right? I
Right.
wanted to continue doing investigations, and this opportunity came with OPR.
Yes.
Actually, Mr. Simpkins was the head OPR at the time, and he kind of recruited me, Billy Simpkins,
Mm-hmm.
to come on with OPR. Again, not many Spanish or no Spanish speakers in OPR. And there was a big demand in the Southwest office, which was sort of like a satellite office of headquarters for OPR that covered Mexico and Central America and Southwest United States continent. A lot of cases or allegations on the border. So that took me to Dallas, Texas, to where I was stationed as an inspector of the Office of Professional Responsibility, which is our internal affairs.
There you go. And that's in law enforcement. When somebody works for internal affairs, it's almost like persona non grata amongst the
Nobody wants to
others.
talk to you anymore.
Right. But here's the thing: you get people like you who have done the job. You're not. It's not that you're out to catch agents like I got you. You broke this little rule here. You're not supposed to stop at the 7-Eleven and get a soda on your way home. That's a violation. That's a big violation. What it is they bring people in that have good common sense, that have experience, because there's tons of accusations made against us. Just to think about it. I mean, you're going after the biggest narcotics traffickers in the world. They hire some of the sleaziest attorneys in the world. How do
Very
they
true.
get back at you? They make false accusations. So you get people like Jaime that comes into internal affairs, and it's not that, oh, well, this guy made a claim against you, or this lady made a claim, you must be guilty. No, let's examine it. Let's look for the truth here and find out what really happened. And so that's why you want people like Jaime in internal affairs, or we call it OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility within DEA. I would never want to do that myself, to be quite honest with you. But it might be better than going to Washington headquarters, right?
Yeah, you know what? And I'm proud of the amount of people that you cleared, like you just
Yeah.
mentioned. A lot of attorneys want to undermine your case, and you seize 200,000. They said, well, my client is saying that there was 400,000
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So by the time the case gets to court, it's completely investigated, and the agent can get on the stand and say, yeah, that was an allegation, but I've been completely cleared by OPR. So again, you just mentioned you go there with good intentions. You never go like, I'm going to put agents in jail or I'm going to this. You're just going in there you're not being judgmental, and you
Right.
go there very objectively. And guys that do bad things, they do it to themselves. And
That's
we
exactly
always
right.
have some person, not things that are extremely bad, but Sometimes they don't follow the rules and they do it to themselves, and you report it the way it happened. But you're
Right.
not out hunting heads, that's for sure.
And let's just make one thing clear here. I don't think the Jaime's ever heard me say this, but I'm pretty sure he's going to agree with me. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
That's correct.
So those that break the law, that tarnish their oath, that tarnish our badge, that make us all look bad, you need to go to jail. You've got
Yes,
no place walking the free streets of our country or being considered one of us. Because once you go to the other side of that thin blue line, you're not one of us.
that's correct. And another thing that you're doing is protecting agents because in many cases, OIG actually gets the case before DEA, the Officer of Inspector General, and they don't really know the inner workings of DEA. So you partner with OIG and you explain, well, that is fine, that agent, that this. And so you actually clear up a lot of things that otherwise they would not recognize
Yeah.
as something that is perfectly fine to do as an agent.
I know they have their place, but I'm just not a big fan of OIG just because they do lack the experience.
Yes, and that's what I'm going to the experience and the way they go about certain things.
So, according to my notes here, you spent 4 years doing OPR, and then you get into a different type of headquarters position with the transfer, right?
That is correct. Another transfer and promotion to, again, GS-15, which was equivalent as an assistant special agent in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Frankie Schroyer, who you
Yeah,
know probably from
very
Atlanta,
well.
was running special projects in headquarters. And I'm selected to the career board to go to the U.S. Southern Command as a military liaison officer. So this time I'm embedded with the military at the major headquarters in Doral, Florida.
Not, and which is Miami for everybody that doesn't
That's
know where
correct.
Doral is.
That's correct.
I got a good friend that's there now, Tom O'Laughlin, who's a huge supporter of the show here. He's still assigned there as a civilian. What is your responsibility there? I mean, I don't understand, or help us all understand, why does DEA have somebody working with the military in there?
Yeah, so my main job was integration of military and law enforcement operations. The military is restricted from actually conducting certain operations and kind of limited to providing training, providing support, providing equipment, but not so much as to being directly involved in some of these operations. I say directly involved, hands on. But yeah, they furnish intelligence and many things that are extremely helpful and useful for our mission. And with that, we overlap in certain things in narco-terrorist organizations like Sendero Luminoso and FARC and Autodefensas in Colombia. So a lot of intelligence overlaps, and as well as the support is extremely important in these stops. Like I mentioned with Panama Express, we don't have the boats or the airplanes or the helicopters to go after some of these vessels in the middle of the sea. So you have to integrate these operations in order to be successful. One thing I like to mention that for a good part of that tour, I had the honor of reporting and working for General Kelly, John Kelly, who's a four-star, and he, as you know, was the chief of staff for President Trump, and another man who is a leader among leaders. And I learned so much working for General Kelly, U.S. Marine four-star general.
And look at this! Look at this kid who grew up in a poor family in Brooklyn.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go. Isn't that something? Now that you say that, Steve, when I was in Mexico, President Clinton was a president in part of that period. And he was coming to Mexico to sign the Brownsville-Merida Agreement. And they were going to sign it in the peninsula. At the time, or the original location they selected was Quintana Roo, around Cancun, where he was supposed to meet with the president of Mexico for this historic signing. And we had this huge operation against the Juarez cartel in Cancun, a lot of things going on underground. And I get a call from the ONDCP, Office of National Control Drug Policy,
right,
to ask me if the President of the United States can come to this location. So here's this same kid in Brooklyn who was looking for bottles through the trash can.
Yep.
Is being asked if the president can come here. So again, I'm not talking about myself, but the grandeur of our country, right? And our flag, and how they let a poor Spanish kid from Brooklyn make these decisions over the leader of the free world, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
eventually we did it in Merida, not Cancun. He did come, and I did cover that visit with Secret Service, and I got to meet the president back then. But it just shows you what a great country we live in.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a true American success story. This is what can be accomplished in our country, as well as other countries, other free countries around the world can also attain this type of success in their lives. But it's just, it's Jaime and I. We were like 20 minutes late getting this thing started because we're catching up, talking about different things, and it's just it's what's available. It's what you make of it. Life is as good or as bad as you make it.
Yes.
That's what I tell Jaime and I. We just got invited to go back up to the DEA Academy later this month. No, I'm sorry, early April, to talk to the basic agent trainees and the chemist or the analyst, whoever happens to be in session up there at the time. And we always open up for a Q&A at the end. And usually the special agent in charge of the academy or one of the associate special agents in charge will ask us, do we have any advice for the trainees? My advice is you've got a golden opportunity to travel around the world at somebody else's expense. You're going to participate in adventures that you never dreamt of. And when you're in the office with all those crusty old farts in there that are complaining about whatever they're complaining about because they're always there, it's up to you to decide whether you want to make it a good day or a bad day. People dread going to headquarters, but you go up there and make the best of it. The
Absolutely.
connections is what you do in headquarters, because when you come
Absolutely.
back out to the field, you're going to know people all around the world that you can get things done. So again, me going off on a tangent, these are Murph's personal thoughts,
No,
but
well said. Well said,
it
Steve.
and it's things that we both experienced, so we know it's true.
Yes.
So you finish up there with Southern Command, but you don't leave Miami, do you?
No, and Southern Command met some great people. They had a Wounded Warrior chapter there, so met a lot of the heroes that came back from
Yeah.
the war, and also was very involved with the Haiti disaster,
Mm.
with the earthquake. Southern Command responded to that. It was a tour where I learned a lot. I learned a lot also from the inner workings of the military hierarchy and the brass level. So it was a very very interesting tour there at the U.S. Southern Command. From there, I was selected to as a lateral transfer back to the Miami Division, back to the field as an assistant special agent in charge, an ASAC, for one of the divisions. That one covered the Bahamas and cover our air operations in the Bahamas as well. And again, just a great tour, and worked for Mark Truville, who was the special
Mm-hmm.
agent in charge at the time, and really enjoyed that as well. And then, lucky enough, I'm an ASAC for about a year and a half, and I'm lucky enough to be selected to be a senior executive right in Miami as the deputy or associate special agent in charge. AD Wright was a special agent in charge, who I just love. AD, we all love him. You know,
Everybody
just
does.
everybody loves AD, and had the pleasure of working with him. And I feel like we formed a great team and handled a lot of matters that were going on in Miami. And I was there for a little over 3 years, and it was my greatest honor to serve as the head of the Miami Field Division.
Yeah, and for us, a senior executive service (SES) is that's the highest promotion you can get without a presidential appointment in federal law enforcement. It requires the attorney general sign off,
Right.
and it's a big deal. I'm so proud of mine. I've got it hanging on my wall here in my little man cave where we're doing the podcast from. And to be in charge of the Miami Field Division, you were. I mean, Miami's not as large as it was back when you and I were young agents, but back then it was the central location for cocaine coming into the United States. I mean, it was just wild, wild times. And you mentioned AD Wright. For those of you that have been with the show for a long time, we had AD's partner on here as a guest, Dave Gaddis, a couple of years ago now, I guess. We're in our fourth year here, coming up on the end of our fourth year on Game of Crimes. If you remember that story, and Dave had gone in on a deal, and there was a shooting, and AD lost an eye. He was shot in the eye. And this guy, just a massive man to start with, a bear of a man, but like a big cuddly bear. I mean, a
Yes.
former football player in college, just a huge person, but with a huge heart as well. Just think the world of A.D. Wright. And the fact that you got to work with him in that capacity, I mean, that's leadership to the nth degree as far as I'm concerned. After you've done that a while, when and why did you decide to retire from DEA?
Well, our mandatory age was coming up. I wasn't mandatory yet. However, it was a long career. I had had 38 years of government service, which is a long time. And opportunity came about in the private sector in which they were looking for someone with Mexico experience because this company has a big footprint in Mexico, is a global company with presence throughout the world, has something over 60,000 employees or so. So
Wow.
they were looking for somebody who had that experience. So I decided it was time and, hoping that I could bring some of this experience onto the private sector. And it's been a great career as well. I had the opportunity to go to many locations throughout the world. Just got back from Germany, as a matter of fact. One thing I want to point out is wherever I go, without exception, people ask me two questions. And the first one is, do you know Steve Murphy and Javier Pena? That's the first one. And the second one is, hey, on that Netflix series Narco, is all that stuff real?
Damn right, it's real.
So with that, no, with that, congratulations, Steve, because that series, Netflix series, have been so popular that everyone throughout the world just about knows the series, and they always have to ask questions. These are places where I'm compelled to say that I work for DEA. So as soon as you say DEA, their
Mm-hmm.
mind goes right to Narcos and to
Yeah.
Steve Murphy and Javier. So you,
I appreciate you saying that,
yes,
man. That position you took, I'm not going to mention the company. It's up to you whether you do or not. But
yeah,
you're the director of security, right?
that's correct. Director of Global Security.
And you've been going on doing that for I guess 7 years, right?
6 years, a little over 6 years, and it's been a great challenge. And you learned a lot too. I'm still learning. Private sector is completely different, so you learn something every day, and that's the good thing about
That's a good point. That learning thing,
it.
because I used to tell my guys, when you think you know everything, this is as I got up in the higher ranks. When you think you know everything there is about drug enforcement, let me know because I want you out.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to learn more things as
Yes,
you go along in your career, you're a detriment to yourself, you're a detriment to the organization, and you're going to get either yourself or somebody else hurt
that's correct.
because the narcotic situation is very fluid. It changes regularly. They've got more money, access to more technology and weapons than we ever have, even though we represent the government. That's the truth. That's what it
Yes.
boils down to.
And the good thing about that is that we have exposed to a lot of leaders in the military and law enforcement and that, but there's other styles of leadership as well at the private sector, and I have
Mm-hmm.
met quite a few in this company that make you look at things with a different set of lenses and a different
Right?
perspective, which is very helpful as well.
It
But
is.
again, like you mentioned, it's all about attitude and not going in there, hey, I was DEA and I did this and I kicked doors and this and that. Well, it's not for kicking doors, it's about the shareholders now, right? It's all
Yeah,
different.
absolutely.
It's not about God and mission now. It's about other things, but
But
still
that
just
bottom
as
line,
important, right? Because thousands and thousands of people work for this
right?
company, and you're representing them and their families as well.
Absolutely. And before we get into talking about one or two other things, if you had it to do all over again, is there anything that you would change from the way you grew up to going into the Navy to NCIS to coming into DEA to going into the private sector? I mean, you've had an adventuresome life.
That's a great question. When you look back, you can only live life looking at backwards. You can see that in every stage of your life, you learn something in preparation for. And I used to tell my guys when I was an SES, I said, look, it took me 35 years to become an SES. And
Mhm.
in every single assignment, everything I did prepared me for this day. And now I'm kind of like the father of all you guys watching over you, a bunch of young kids running around with guns. And I said, everything that happened happens for a reason. And again, I'm back to Christianity and God and my Savior Jesus Christ. But there is a plan, and it's all interwoven some way. Something that you think doesn't make sense, either
Mm-hmm.
an event or some kind of personal relationship. Somehow there is a meaning to it, and there's a purpose, and there's a season for everything. And it builds you to what one is in this day, and hopefully for the better and the good of humanity. So, could I change something? Of course, not knowing what the purpose was for certain things. Of course, I'm going to say yes, but I think that everything happened the way it was supposed to be. Respecting God and His will, I would say everything happened the way He wanted it to happen.
Good for you, brother. Good for you, man. I love it. I had no idea how you were going to answer that question. That's why I didn't tell you about it beforehand, because
Okay, well,
you get a natural reaction from people.
well, thank you,
But
thank you.
and a couple other things I want to mention. You received some really nice recognition throughout your career. You received some awards that were pretty high ranking within federal service, didn't you?
Yes, which I'm very proud of. In the Navy, which doesn't give out many awards, I don't know if the Navy is the service that gives the least amount of awards and medal. But in that training school that I mentioned, it was Navy Marine Command, and my XO was a Marine, and I received the Navy Achievement Medal, which is a high medal for
Mm-hmm.
especially for an enlisted. And then with DEA, my highest achievement was the Attorney General's Award, and that was a direct nomination by Janet Reno when she came to Mexico and she met with the Attorney General of Mexico. And he knew I briefed the Attorney General on many occasions with regard to the Governor Quintana Roo and the Juarez cartel. So she nominated me directly. The
Wow.
Administrators Award I received. A few of the administrators award, but the most proud one is the group achievement, right?
Yeah.
Because as you mentioned, is all about team, and my office and Merida received the administrators award for group achievement because of everything we did those days to dismantle the Juarez cartel.
I love it. Well, and see, he's not going to even tell us about that unless you ask him, because he's a humble guy. So now let's talk about this book,
Sir.
The Rule of Kongo. And for those of you that listen to this entire interview here, you heard me say at the beginning, this book scared the crap out of me. I'm not kidding. I started reading it, and I think I was into my second day, and I was about 2/3 of the way through, and I had to set it down and walk away. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this stuff really happening? And then I'm thinking,
He's gone crazy, you said.
well, I'm thinking, Jaime said, now this part of this is based on true things. And I'm thinking, is Jaime like a voodoo god or something out there? Are you an evil man? And I even called you once and told you, man, this is scary. And you kind of explained things to me. So it got
Yes.
me back on track. So I did finish reading it. But it is definitely a book like I've never read before. If you've ever wondered about, especially the Santeria religion, because we encountered that a lot when we were agents in Miami. The other religion that you mentioned, never even heard of that
Palo
one.
Mayombe. Palo Mayombe.
I can't even say it.
Or
I
Palo
mean,
Monte. Palo Monte. Yeah.
I don't know. This was an exhaustive, it had to be exhaustive research that you did to learn all the inner workings and about these different spirits and what the roles they play and the rituals they go through. I'm not recommending this book if you're looking to join these religions, but if you're curious, absolutely, man. Just be prepared and just remember it's fiction. Okay. It's not Jaime. I'm pointing at
Yeah.
it here on the screen. It's
It's
not
fiction
Jaime in real life.
inspired. It's fiction inspired.
Oh, so where'd you come with that idea, and what motivated you to write the book?
Well, first I got to qualify that number one, I am not an expert in these religions like you mentioned. Again, this took a lot of research, and actually, a lot of these things were happening around me that I didn't even understand,
Mm-hmm.
but they were happening. And when I'm doing the research for the book, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, that was happening. I was in danger. You're talking about situations where you're in danger. I was in danger. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of when you have like bullets whizzing by your head and you don't even realize that they are. So again, take you back to my days in Miami. Well, there's part of the childhood experience as well. So
Mm-hmm.
let me take it back to the childhood to take it in a chronological order. In Brooklyn or in New York, I like to say that every block has a witch. And it's a person who is involved in spirituality, who either reads cards or into Santeria or one of these religions that practice this, but you don't give it a second thought. You're a kid playing on the street, and you hear the drums and the animals and some screams and bells and chants, but it almost becomes part of the environment, sort of like the horns and the dogs and the sirens and everything else that you hear in New York City, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So in our block, we had our own witch, who was a Cuban Santera. She was a priestess. And we would see followers coming into our apartment all day long, bringing flowers, bringing food, bringing things. And these were all her, what they call creyentes, or believers,
Mm-hmm.
or faithful believers. And we will just say hi, and we will hustle a little bit to get a tip from them. You go to a store to buy them something, or buy them cigarettes, because back then as a kid you could buy cigarettes, and all that. So all we got was a warning from our parents saying, "Hey, stay away from that apartment. That lady is a medium. She's half crazy. Those people are possessed and all that." But she just became part of your neighborhood,
Yeah.
And you observe certain things when you run errands. You go into the apartment and you see the candles and the figurines and the flowers and all these things related to the religion, but you don't understand. You just know that it's some kind of weird religion that they told you to stay away from, and the school tells you to stay away from as well.
Especially a
So,
Catholic school.
especially the Catholic school. But the confusing thing is that you see Catholic figures and statues in there, like the Mother Mary and a crucifix and all that. So you don't really have an understanding of what's going on. And you, as kids, you're curious, but then again, you're not. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like you had Google back then that you could research all
Right.
these things. So that is the basis of what I knew about Santeria. By the way, this lady would scare you too. And I think I mentioned this initially. She would kind of like hide behind a tree or behind a building, and you'll be walking back from school, and she'll be running and jump on your back with a fat cigar in her mouth and start speaking in tongues, right? And this lady weighed something like 70 or 80 pounds, and all dressed in white with her beads. And you didn't know what to do, to fling her to the side or something, but it was terrifying.
I bet.
But she would do this. So when you're walking back from school, you're looking over your shoulder, making sure that this lady is not around. In the book, I identify her as Minga,
Mm-hmm.
but her name was different, right? So this
Yeah.
is a real person that was in our neighborhood.
Wow.
And it was known as the person who was cure you with home remedies, basically. And so that was the basis of my understanding of the religion and anything else. So fast forward as an agent, and you will see it in the book where this kid has a relationship with Minga from doing errands for her, and he's exposed to that religion. And basically, she tells the kid that he's the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
And that there is going to be some manifestations through him, but she predicts that he will be a man of law and order in the future. And that's when the kid becomes an agent. But fast forward in real life in Miami, there's an attorney that keeps calling me. Now he's a very high power attorney who we won't name, but he kept calling me saying, "Hey, I have a client who was arrested and he wants to cooperate, but none of the agents that arrested him will give him the time of day."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a case out of Atlanta in combination with Tampa. And I have arrested one of his previous clients. And he liked the way, I'm talking about the attorney, he liked the way that I treated his client and worked with him. So we developed kind of a trust, a working relationship. So he says, "Please give this guy an opportunity." I was in a trial, very busy, but he finally broke it down. And I said, "Okay, have this person come to the division, because I'm not going to meet him anywhere. I don't have time." "Okay, this is his name. He'll be there on a certain day." So if you remember the reception area in Miami, in the Miami division, I go down there, I set up a meeting with this guy, and this guy pops up. To give you a description, his shirt is wide open, hairy chest, has a huge medallion of an Indian on his chest. You could see he had several stab wounds, not fresh, just several stab wounds, rings at every finger. Not to make fun, but he had a little bit of a wandering eye, so you weren't sure if he was looking at you or not. And I come and I ask his name, and he says, "Are you Jaime?" And I says, "Yeah, I'm Jaime." And he just makes like this weird scream and goes into a pose, like a weird pose. And I think I told you, remind me Elvis in Vegas when he used to get down on the ground and just,
Or like the Heisman Trophy.
and he kept that pose for something like 20 or 30 seconds, just staring into the space. Not sure what that meant. And then all of a sudden he starts speaking in tongues that I didn't understand what he was saying. So at that point, again, your mind is like a computer that, you save things in your hard drive. And I remember Santeria from back of my childhood. Well, he turned out not to be Santeria, but Palo Mayombe, which is the dark side, or what they call the evil side of Santeria. But I didn't even know that at the time.
Yeah.
So my first question to him was, "Are you a Santero?" So when I said, "Are you a Santero?" he figured that I had certain knowledge of this African underground religion, which I'll go into a little bit as to these religions. He just starts laughing out loud, and he tells me, "You're the one. You're the one." Right? Kind of like the same words that this character says at the beginning of the book. And
when he's a
now
little
you
kid.
see that you're the one by two different religions that come from Africa. So, of course, I bring them in and start debriefing this individual. So when I talk about the religion, Steve, just as a little note here, the reason the book is called The Rules of Kongo with K is because between the 14th and 19th century in Central Africa reigned the Kingdom of Congo. And through the transatlantic slave trade between the 1500s and 1800s, these African religions that were syncretized with Catholicism were brought onto the New World. And in order for these individuals or slaves to practice their religion, they would have to hide them or hide their gods behind the images of Christianity. But these religions flourished kind of in secrecy in the background. So the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Dutch would not admonish them or punish them for practicing the religion. So that's how these religions are established in the New World, in particular in the Caribbean. So they're called Afro-Caribbean religions or underground religions that eventually the diaspora bring into South Florida. And now in South Florida, unbeknownst to many people, thousands and thousands of people practice these religions.
And I'm actually looking at your website here as you're telling us a little bit about, but I'm not ignoring you. I don't want anybody to think that's what's going on.
Yes.
I do want to show you, this is the cover of the book again, so you can see it, The Rules of Kongo. You can find this on Amazon, but you can also, Jaime has is this your website, Balam Books?
Balam Books is the website, yes, Balam Books.
So that's spelled BAHLAM. And then it's books, no dot in between, just balambooks.com.
Correct.
Can they order the books on this website?
Not yet, because as you know, with Amazon, there's certain commitments, but eventually they'll be able to. So right now through Amazon.
Yeah. So, and as I said earlier, I'm going to post this direct link on the Game of Crimes website. It's gameofcrimespodcast.com. Just go to the book page at the top. You'll see a little icon for books, and it shows all the books of all the guests we've had on for almost 4 years now, and Jaime's will be right there at the top of the list. Jaime, this has been the time talking to you has just flown by. It usually does for me, but you and I came on pretty much at the same time. Our backgrounds mirror each other a lot, just in different countries for the most part.
Yes.
But the names that you've mentioned just brings back so many good memories, so many heroic agents that we worked with over the years. That even Trouville, man, he was a legend within DEA,
yes,
80s a legend. Everybody we talked about has just been fantastic. This has been like an old home week catch-up, I guess would be a cool way to do it.
Absolutely.
But before we finish up here, any parting thoughts you want to leave everybody with? Words of wisdom.
Well, just to finish, this individual that comes in becomes a confidential informant,
Mm.
right? And that's the point I'm trying to make. And we initiated an operation in Hialeah targeting a great number of organizations using the religion as a conduit to penetrate or infiltrate these organizations. So you will see in the book some close examples of what happened. Of course, is fiction and things are embellished and exaggerated to a certain extent. But there were a lot of stories and a lot of things that happened. I went undercover, since we were talking about undercover,
Mm-hmm.
into that botanica where the shrine and all these things that you mentioned were kept. And a lot of things happen because a lot of these organizations are looking for protection and
Mm-hmm.
are looking to these spirits and these gods to resolve their legal problems, and they come and visit and really lay out their plans as to what they're going to do nefariously or in their criminal world. And we took advantage of that, and that's really the essence of the book. Of course, the age goes into the gray area, which never happened, but it was one of those undercover signs that really tested my fortitude, tested my faith, and many other things that we face as undercover agents.
We've all done some crazy things. I don't know that I would have gone into that botanica.
Yes,
I mean, the way you describe it, there's a skeleton in there. There's animal
yes.
parts.
And the thing is, all of the leadership, all I had as preparation was this experience that I had as a kid. I had no clue about the rivalries between these religions that were brought here from Africa and what this man, and they pilfered remains and they did all these things, but I didn't know. To me, it was undercover. I was going to go with this guy that had this gig and we were going to do good and put people in jail.
Yeah.
But all these dynamics and complexities, I have no clue in. And writing the book, I did a lot of research and discovered a lot of things. And let me tell you one good story that I think you're going to find interesting. But my ASAC at the time, it's going to remain nameless here, but when you know who he is, I'll tell you later. But he never heard about anything like this, and he was new to our division, and he says, "Listen, I hear about this priest that you have as an informant and this thing, and you going undercover into this place. I want to go visit the place, and I wanted to go see this place." So believe it or not, here he is. I'm a junior agent. I'm taking a GS-15,
Mm-hmm.
assistant special agent in charge there. So this guy decides to do a cleansing of him with a horse's tail that looked like a whip, and he's calling these gods and cleansing Asak. He's frozen, and the priest is basically speaking in tongues, and this guy is freaking out. The Asak, he says, "Jaime, what is he saying? What is he saying?" I said, "Well, he's predicting your future, or he's telling you how you're going to be blessed." And he says, "Well, tell him to tell me what is he saying." So the priest stops for a minute, staring into the air, and he says, he didn't speak English, only Spanish, and the ASAC didn't speak Spanish. And he says, he has a severe problem of ED. So
All right, I want to hear how you translated that to the boss.
of course I did not. I told him, "Sir," he said, "that you're a great leader."
Oh, that could have been a career-changing moment.
So that was his experience, and we made many cases in that Botanica, big and small, something like 35 cases. A lot of intelligence came out of that. We saved the life of a state prosecutor that a gang came in there and laid out their plan, how they were going to execute her. And
Wow.
many important cases happened, controlled deliveries, and just other petty criminals. They wanted to steal cars and they will bring their tools to get blessed and that sort of thing. It was a very interesting, very intense operation. Again, not
Mm-hmm.
everybody that came in there were criminals. I would say maybe 10%. All it was about love triangles and that sort of emotional type stuff. But the amount of criminals that came in there was pretty interesting as well.
That's got to be one of the wildest stories I've ever heard of any DEA agent anywhere. Oh, it's just, I mean, that's just something you don't even, I couldn't think you could ever even dream up that you might be doing something like that.
Never, never. And I went into it again, not thinking about dangers, about having no knowledge, and that's one of the lessons to undercovers. Know your area, know your subject, know what you're dealing with, right? because I did not know. I did not know. And I went in there, and it's just now that I'm finding out all these things that were going on behind the scenes that could have been very dangerous and threatening
Oh.
for me. I dedicated the book to all the undercover agents
Mm-hmm.
that take that path, and to their families that kind of put up with the undercover when they come back home. And these experiences affect them in one way or another. So at the
Yep.
beginning of the book, I dedicate that to.
Excellent. Excellent. And again, that's the Rules of Kongo. Jaime, this has been a hoot, brother. It's been a while bringing you on here. I think we've probably been talking about it over a
Yes,
year,
sir.
but I knew you were busy with your book and your work and everything. But I do highly recommend that you get a copy of this book and just take a look into it. Just be prepared. I'm
And
not
I
kidding you. It's
promise him that I
scary.
do not practice these religions.
There you go.
But I did immerse myself into this, and I saw some things that are completely against my character, my values. But again,
Mm-hmm.
forgotten country, do you do many things, right? And
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, we wanted to put bad guys in jail, and that's what we did.
Yep. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, this has been a story. Jaime's story is a perfect story of an American success story. A guy from a family who, just because of circumstances, was not financially well off, grew up in very difficult times and difficult circumstances, but he didn't let his situation determine his future. He figured out at a young age how to succeed by being successful in school, went on to join the Navy, serve his country, went to NCIS as a special agent, then came over to DEA, and now he's still a leader in the world today. All these years later, he's still being a leader. That's what this show is about, showing you what type of leadership is out there, what people are willing to commit to dedicate their lives to something greater than themselves, and that's serving their fellow man. For those of you that have been with the show for a while, you've heard me talk about when we work for the government, we're what we call public servants, and that includes all the way up to the president. A lot of people in this world look at that as a derogatory term. Here on Game of Crimes, I don't. I look at it as a heroic title to have, because these people have chosen to dedicate their lives to serve their fellow man. Tell me a higher calling than that? I don't think there is one. Not in Murph's world anyway. So that's why I always say we have these studs and studettes, the heroes of the world, come on the show. Jaime, your story, you've been very transparent with us. You've been very honest. That's all I ask on the show here. Apparently the people like it because they continue to come back and watch the show. So, brother, thank you so much. Thank you is just not strong enough a word. He sent me his book ahead of time on a PDF so I could read it, just so we could talk about it intelligent. Well, I try to talk intelligent, but it doesn't always come out that way. But brother, if there's anything I can ever do for you, you know where I am. You know how to get a hold of me. Wish you continued success. God's blessings on you and your family, brother.
Thank you so much for the kind words. And thank you for offering and providing this platform for us to tell our stories and promote our stories and what all these heroes, I'm not counting myself, do for humanity, as you mentioned. So it is my greatest honor to be on your show, on your podcast.
Thank you, brother. And having said that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for continuing to come back every week. You keep me motivated by the messages I get from you. Sometimes this is a very time-consuming job, and this is a job running a podcast, but I love it. You've been very understanding in my recent personal situation, and for all of you that are aware of it, that have sent me the messages, tons and tons of messages. Thank you very much. It has kept me motivated. I'm getting things back on track now, but you got to keep coming back. You know why? This is the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, and we're talking about the game of crimes. I'll see you folks next week. God bless.